Defied out of spite. Wanted an ad in just one single color? Well, here you go, buddy. This incident happened many years ago, back when I was still a graphic designer, but I still think about it from time to time. I was 22 years old at the time. I had just graduated from college with a degree in graphic design. My first job was at an advertising agency. Mostly we churned out those same awful printed car ads that end up in your mailbox. And they go straight into the trash. You know the type, one screaming font across the whole page, every bit of space crammed with photos, cars everywhere with 50 vehicles squeezed into a 20 by 15 centimeter format. In short, just junk. As a recent graduate with no experience, in my naivety, I tried to suggest ideas on how to make proper ads. Not this stuff, but very quickly and rather harshly I was made to understand that this exact crap is what they wanted. Alright, I got the hint and stopped resisting, and of course we had that one client, the main one, bringing in most of the profit, who ordered the majority of this advertising junk. And he had extremely specific requirements for just how awful his ads needed to look. The font had to be impact in every single layout, and it had to fill literally every corner. In one of the ads, he demanded that we fit over 100 cars into a single block. When the layout went to print, it looked like a stereogram. I put up with this guy and his absurd demands for over a year, but over time he somehow managed to get even worse. He started dictating which colors could be used and which were strictly forbidden. And the colors started disappearing one by one. At some point, I finally got fed up with it. When he said that orange was also forbidden, I clarified. Wait, so you're telling me that you don't want me to use red, orange, yellow, green, purple, pink, brown, white, or even black? He confirmed it. I said fine. In the end, only blue was left. And I spent several hours turning all the cars, all the text, the fonts, and basically every element of the layout into the same shade of blue. No gradients, no shadows, no accents of any kind, just solid blue everywhere. As a result, I ended up with a giant blue rectangle, as if someone had rolled a paint roller over it. Of course, I could have drawn such a square in a couple of seconds, but I deliberately wasted several hours using absolutely every element he himself had requested just to cover myself. Because when this masterpiece was sent for approval, the client, as expected, blew up and called to yell at me. I calmly explained that he himself had limited me to a single color, blue, and that I had used all the images and elements he required, just recolored in that shade. All conversations were recorded, so management had no complaints against me. But I still had to spend several more hours redoing the same layout, this time with proper photos and original elements. It was quite a day. Support insisted on communicating via voice messages, so I decided to respond in kind. Hi, I'm 35 years old and I work as an IT manager at a small family-owned trading company. Recently, we switched from an ancient ERP system to a new platform, modern, convenient, and noticeably more efficient. In terms of functionality, there are absolutely no complaints about the product. None at all. All the pain comes from the support service. They respond fairly quickly, but almost always with voice messages. For many years now, I have made it a point not to use voice messages. They break my concentration and make me re-listen for simple info. With text, it's different. You read it, find what you need, and solve it. Audio only slows things down. It slows down the process. I have repeatedly asked them to switch to text and even mentioned that I have hearing problems. They completely ignored this. Yesterday, the cash terminals stopped connecting properly to the local server, even though technically they were all online. I checked everything that was my responsibility and contacted support because from that point on, the issue was no longer on my end. As usual, the first response came as a voice message. When they asked me to send the ID for remote access, I sent it as a voice message. The password too. And then a miracle happened. Support suddenly switched to text. After that, they asked for a screenshot. Then they needed the administrator credentials, and again I sent the long complex password with numbers, uppercase and lowercase letters as a voice message. From that moment on, all correspondence was exclusively in text, including today's update. It turned out that they are fully aware of how annoying voice messages are. They just don't care, unless they have to deal with these inconveniences themselves. You're not going to let me go even though it's obvious I'm not feeling well? Alright, let's see what your boss has to say about that. Let's see what your boss will say. This is a story about my former boss named Jack, who was hired to get the restaurant in order, and he thoroughly enjoyed wielding his power as the general manager. Basically, this guy was your typical tyrant boss who liked giving orders more than actually working. A little about myself. At the time, I was 17 years old. I worked part-time at the restaurant after school, saving up money for college. Plus, I had terrible seasonal allergies. Now I have as many as 3 bottles of strong antihistamines placed in different spots so the medicine is always within reach. The attacks come on suddenly, so taking a pill in the morning isn't an option. But at that time it didn't matter because back then I wasn't taking anything at all. Before, my allergies had never been so bad that they actually interfered with work. And I didn't really have much money either, like a poor school kid. That incident changed everything. Let's get to the story itself. One autumn morning I was working at the car service checkout right across from a Palo Verde tree. If you have those trees growing nearby, you know what kind of hell starts in the fall because of their pollen. After about an hour, my nose was already running like a faucet. I realized where this was heading. I blew my nose and went to look for Jack to sort things out. Working in food service with a runny nose is not a great idea. So I was sure he'd be understanding. But no, I thought too highly of him. First I asked him if I could just switch to another position farther away from that damn tree. No, we have a full staff today. I'm not gonna move you anywhere. Alright then, can I at least run out to the store around the corner for a couple of minutes and buy some regular antihistamines? No, company policy says you can't leave and come back during a single shift. By the way, that's complete nonsense. People regularly went out during long breaks to have a proper meal. By this point I was already starting to be baffled by what was happening. It was obvious that I had a runny nose even just while I was talking to him, and I thought surely he wouldn't take it to such an absurd level. So, I suggested that he just let me go home since I had no way to relieve my condition. The answer was no again. I had to stay put, dripping snot all over the counter while talking to customers. At some point it dawned on me that he wasn't going to give in. Does this guy want me to just sit there and fake a smile despite all my symptoms? Fine, then it's time for some malicious compliance. There's one detail I haven't mentioned yet. I got along pretty well with the franchise owner, Sam, the only person above Jack. I also knew that on this day of the week, Sam usually stopped by the restaurant according to his regular schedule, to work on some paperwork right during my shift. Jack knew about this too, but apparently it never even occurred to him that Sam might disagree with his decision. So I just waited, grabbed a large box of napkins from the staff restroom, went back to my station and kept working as professionally as I possibly could. I went through one entire box of napkins by myself, then a second box and half of a third before Sam showed up. He arrived about an hour before the end of my shift. One of the senior staff gave me the napkins, and I paid him back later. It was awkward to use so many of them, especially since Jack didn't pay for them. My throat was sore from the mucus running down, and my voice had become hoarse from the constant strain. I'm sure the customers thought I'd caught some kind of plague or something like that. Finally, Sam showed up. I calmly waited for him to make his rounds. The restaurant, chat with the staff, ask how everyone was doing, and talk with those who weren't busy. Eventually, he came over to the self-service checkout and immediately saw the state I was in. "Oh, hey, are you feeling okay? You don't look so good," he said. I replied, "I'm hanging in there. It's just allergies acting up. Nothing serious." Sam frowned. "It definitely looks more serious than just allergies." "It's definitely because of the polwart tree. It happens to me every year." Sam seemed confused. "Then why didn't you move to another spot or take some medicine? You can't work with food in that condition?" Aha, got caught on the hook. I asked Jack, he forbade both. And he wouldn't let me go home either. So I'm just trying to somehow make it through the shift. Boom. For a moment, Sam's face twisted, then changed to a hard, determined expression. "Come with me," he said. "I'll find someone to cover for you right now, and we'll talk to Jack." Sam asked me to hand the headset to one of the employees who wasn't busy at the moment. Suddenly, it turned out not to be that difficult after all. After that, he led me to the back office, where Jack was busy with his mysterious affairs. Jack greeted Sam, then noticed me and frowned. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at your station," Jack began to scold me. I didn't even have time to answer before Sam intervened firmly. "I found someone to replace him. For some reason, you left him at the car service register knowing that he's severely allergic to that tree." Jack started repeating the same excuses as before, the same ones he told me, but Sam cut him off again. "Yes, we don't even have a rush of customers right now. You could have easily moved him to another spot or just sent him home." Jack tried to wriggle out of it once more. I asked the others, but no one wanted to switch. Then Sam turned to me. "I'm sending you home. You shouldn't have to finish your shift in this condition. Sorry you even had to stick it out here for so long." I thanked him and left. Unfortunately, Sam closed the office door, so I couldn't eavesdrop on the rest of the conversation. I clocked out and immediately ran to the store around the corner, where I quickly took some medicine, anything to stop this endless runny nose. Long story short, later I developed a persistent severe cough that wouldn't go away, so I went to the clinic. It turned out that most of that mucus had gotten into my lungs, and I ended up with pneumonia. Fantastic. In the end, a day of strict bed rest as prescribed by the doctor, a course of steroids, and a hefty pack of pills that I took for a whole week, and I finally got back to normal. Since then, I always carry antihistamines with me, so I never let things get that far again. As for Jack, as far as I know, nothing ever happened to him in the end. Although at the next staff meeting, this incident was still briefly mentioned. Sam reminded everyone that employees should not come to work when they're sick, and if symptoms appear during a shift, those people should be sent home immediately. Who would have thought? Unfortunately, after what happened, the work atmosphere was completely ruined for me, and I rather quickly found a new place where I felt much happier. Jack, on the other hand, still works there to this day, although, according to rumors, he's planning to quit and move to another country to be with his girlfriend. I genuinely feel sorry for that woman. My boss insisted that we should cut out the middleman and save 15%, so I let him manage all the complex logistics of a 40-foot container himself, manenim. I work as a purchasing manager at a medium-sized retail company that sells various home goods. For 5 years now, we've been relying on the services of the same local importer for our seasonal decor. Yes, they have a markup, but they take care of customs, quality control, and delivery. For us, there's no headache at all. Recently, we got a new COO who is convinced he's a total business genius. Last month, he called a meeting and gave a speech. He lectured me about how we're wasting money by working with a local distributor. He ordered me to cancel the contract for the holiday shipment and work directly with the manufacturer. I warned him, told him that dealing with freight forwarders, customs duties, and port delays is a full-time job. A full-time job? He replied I was just being lazy. He even said, just give me the contacts and the deal, I'll close it myself. So, I did. I spent several days on Alibaba and put together a list of reliable Chinese manufacturers of glass Christmas ornaments. I gave him a spreadsheet with 20 factories, their MOQs, minimum order quantities, and time zone differences. And then I just sat back and watched. He found out that the FOB price free on board does not include delivery to our warehouse. Then he transferred the money to the supplier, but didn't hire a customs broker. Because of that, the shipment was flagged for inspection by US Customs. As a result, the container sat at the port for 10 days because he didn't even know what an ISF filing was. This is a mandatory pre-declaration for ocean freight shipments to the US. The demurrage fees alone ended up costing more than the very 15% you earn. He was trying to save money. Yesterday, he came up to my desk, looking unusually humble, and asked if I still had the phone number of our old importer. The tax authorities did not accept my tax deduction, so I claimed an even bigger deduction using the same logic they used to deny me. In Switzerland, every tax return is reviewed by an inspector. They can accept deductions, adjust them, or reject them entirely. If you disagree with the decision, you can appeal it. In that case, the matter is reviewed by another department. There are two relevant deductions. One is for lunch outside the home, if you physically don't have time to go home during your lunch break. And the other is for commuting mileage. You are allowed to deduct 15 Swiss francs from your gross income. That's 19 US dollars for each meal eaten outside the home. And 60 centimes for each kilometer. That's $1.21 per mile traveled on your way to and from work. A brief digression. In 2020 and 2021, I had to file 2 appeals, because my inspector at the time made blatantly serious mistakes. Since appeals are rare, in 2021 I was additionally audited by the tax authorities. After 6 months of correspondence, the auditor admitted that I was right, and that his colleague had indeed made a serious mess of things. I even jokingly asked if it wouldn't make more sense to audit the inspectors themselves instead of me. He laughed and said he couldn't answer that question. In the following years, I called him a couple of times for advice, so we developed a perfectly normal and respectful relationship. Fast forward to 2025. I have already filed my tax return for 2024 and claimed both of the available deductions for 200 working days because even though the office is only 15 kilometers from home, I simply don't have enough time to go home for lunch. The following amounts were indicated in the tax return. Lunch deduction, 15 francs for 200 days, which equals 3,000 francs. Mileage deduction, 0.6 francs per 15 kilometers for 2 trips a day over 200 working days equals 3,600 francs. The total amount of deductions is 6,600 francs. A couple of months later, I received a tax notice. Among other things, the inspector denied the lunch deduction, arguing that I supposedly have enough time to go home for lunch. I filed an appeal, and from that moment on, my malicious compliance with the rules began. Since, in their opinion, I have enough time to go home for lunch, it clearly means I make not 1 round trip per day, but 2. Accordingly, I claim the mileage deduction for 2 round trips per day. 0.6 francs for 15 kilometers for 4 trips. Trips per day for 200 working days equals 7,200 francs. That is 600 francs more than was originally indicated. About a month later, I received a call from the same auditor who had audited me back in 2021. After a few routine phrases, he got to the point. Listen, you do understand why I'm calling, right? It's about your last appeal. Regarding the lunches, I have to side with my colleague. With that distance, we can't accept this deduction. But I have to admit, if you really do make 2 round trips a day, then you are fully entitled to an increased mileage deduction. Cleverly done. I could just picture his smirk. A week later, I received a new tax notice. As a result, the taxable pre-financial income turned out to be 600 francs, about $750 lower, but I had to cover the costs of the tax appeal myself. You're right, we will never work together again. About 7 years ago, I was promoted to office manager at a small construction company. The position was in a very neglected state when I got it. The previous office manager was chaotic and, to put it mildly, not good with technology. When I started in this position, I was a newcomer in this type of work, but I was always very detail-oriented. I didn't understand how our work with suppliers and materials accounting was organized. So I immediately started recording absolutely everything, so that later I could make reports and at least figure things out myself. About 2 months after I took the position, the company owner announced that he wanted to sign checks only once a week. The idea was this: we notify suppliers that all invoices received from Friday through Thursday at noon will be paid by a check that will be issued and signed on Friday. I don't know how common this practice is or whether it's used anywhere else, but judging by the reaction of some suppliers, it wasn't entirely normal in our field. And you can understand them. We're talking about truck drivers who come, pick up the material, pay for it out of their own pocket, and then deliver it either to the site or to our base. If they do this on a Friday and submit the invoice, they end up without $500,000 until the following Friday. Previously, they used to get paid within 1 or 2 days, and many of them literally live paycheck to paycheck. For them, this was extremely inconvenient. I sent a letter to the suppliers explaining the new procedure. Not everyone liked it, but no one had any major problems with it. It seems I gave them about 2 weeks before the policy took effect. Plus, we had been working with them for years, and they knew we always paid. Except for one supplier. He immediately said that this was going to be a real headache. I apologized and explained that this was the company's new policy and we couldn't make exceptions. He seemed to agree, and that was the end of the conversation. 3 or 4 weeks go by and he calls me in a panic, demanding that he be issued a check immediately. I apologized, reminded him that according to the rules, the check would be signed the next day. It was Thursday, and told him there was nothing I could do about it. He hung up and immediately called my colleague, the project manager. He was yelling into the phone so loudly that since we were sitting in the same small office, I could hear absolutely everything. The conversation ended with the phrase, "I will never work with her again." He said he would only communicate with you from now on. And here it's important to clarify something. As I already mentioned, I pay very close attention to details, and the material that this supplier regularly delivered to our base constantly didn't match in quantity. According to my system, we had 100 yards, but the foreman was requesting 3 more trucks with 45 yards each because there were only about 10 yards left in the warehouse. Note, in construction, especially in the USA and Canada, bulk materials are measured by volume, not by weight, and the standard unit of volume is the cubic yard. I brought up this issue with the owners and foreman, and we introduced a new procedure. Our drivers were required to fill out paperwork every day indicating how much material they delivered to the sites. I started accounting for literally every single yard, and yes, some losses were possible, but not 100 yards worth. Before that, I always thought the problem was on our side. Either we were overusing material, or we weren't properly tracking where each batch was going, or we were measuring the leftovers at the base incorrectly. Most likely it was all of those things at once. But after I was called a bitch, I called another supplier who delivered us a different material and asked if he could supply this one as well. I told him the volume we usually order. That's 45 yards per truck, usually with 3 full trucks a week. At such a price, he was honestly stunned and said, "How does that guy even manage to offer that? That is honestly unreal, it's so cheap." Then he asked who exactly this supplier was. I told him the name and he said yes. His truck physically can't carry more than 20 yards. Then when I hesitated, he added, "Do you get weight receipts?" I had never heard of these kinds of receipts before. I was a complete newcomer to this industry. No one really trained me. But at the same time, I noticed that all the other suppliers had the weight of the cargo listed on their invoices. I noted this but didn't pay much attention to it, because we calculated in yards, not in tons. For some items, I converted from weight to yards because only the tonnage was indicated there. But most people had both yards and tonnage indicated in their documents. But this guy always handed in a handwritten slip that just said 45 yards. It was always like that. The previous office manager used to order 3 trucks, each with 45 yards. The material was unloaded in the backyard. I don't think she ever even told the warehouse how much material there was supposed to be. Yeah, and at first I didn't do it either until I started noticing discrepancies. Until I started setting up processes to eliminate those discrepancies. My favorite supplier kept going. "Listen, I know the quarry where he gets the material from. I get other material from them myself, and I have a good relationship with them. They should have copies of the receipts. I'll try to get them for you." He asked for the date of the last delivery. I gave him all the information. Even though I had a good attitude toward him, I was pretty skeptical. What if he just wants to lure me over and sell at a higher price? Well, either way, I was curious. What if he's right? That same day, he sent me photos of the receipts, and of course the name of that supplier was listed on them. The date matched, the driver's name matched. I hadn't told him that name. Even the time matched exactly as long as it takes to get from that quarry to our base, and when the truck arrived at our place, according to the records, it was a scammer. In short, each time he only took 20 yards of material but billed us as if it were 45. So we were overpaying for 75 yards every time we ordered and paid for 3 trucks. That's how he was able to offer us such a good price. As it turned out later, the owner of the company once forced the previous office manager to negotiate this deal with him. I carefully reviewed our full business history with this supplier. Unfortunately, the previous office manager didn't keep the receipts. So all I had were old checks in the system. We had been working with this person for years. It could have been tens of thousands of dollars stolen, but without receipts and weight documents, we couldn't prove anything. The only thing left to do was to simply stop working with him. I asked our preferred supplier for his price, then checked offers from other companies, and the price turned out to be quite market competitive. From that moment on, we started ordering from him, so yes, that guy really never worked with us again. With that, he got exactly what he wanted. When we stopped placing orders, he tried several times to contact his colleague, but each time the colleague replied, "Speak with the manager." He called once, but I missed it. After all, he said he never wanted to speak again. His wish was granted. I'm no longer the office manager, and thank God for that. I couldn't stand that position and was genuinely happy the day I was finally able to hire someone to replace me. The office manager still only processes and writes out checks on Fridays. But at least I managed to properly bring her up to speed and pass on far more detailed knowledge and training than I ever received myself. Now we work with much larger and more established companies that have standard payment terms. Payment in 30 days and on credit. This became possible largely thanks to the development of our area. More serious players have simply appeared. And my favorite supplier eventually sold his business to one of these companies. It's a little sad, but that's business. Thank you very much for watching. Share your own cases of malicious compliance in the comments below the video. Don't forget to check out our other videos. Bye. See you tomorrow. Bye.